welcome to the course, The History of Computers. Now, I told you in our course outline that we'll be talking about the history of computers. Now, there are a lot of stories about the history of computers, which if you start going through, it's kind of very vast, and most of them don't even have this sequence in order. It's just scrambling a lot of histories and what people feel like really initiations to the evolution of computers in our world. But after a lot of research, I decided to bring out the most important ones about the history of computers, and we're going to start immediately. So the first known computer was the abacus. It was the first device that was able to calculate. Now the abacus is a device that is actually made up of strings and beads used to calculate, and it was used in ancient China and Asia, in the Asian continent, which included China, Japan. It was also used by the Greeks according to history and the Babylonians. So after the abacus, we had the introduction of William Shakespeare in 1623 that built a calculating clock which could add and subtract, and would give a ding sound, which was the sound of a bell, to show that it had finished recording, it had finished adding and subtracting. It was the first kind of clock that was built. So after that, we saw Blaise Pascal in 1642, a French mathematician that built a mechanical calculator that could add, subtract, and multiply. So he built this calculator, and in 1671, Godfrey took a hint from what he did, and also developed the mechanical calculator to also divide, solve square roots of numbers. So these were the first major inventions that led to the stepping stone into the advancement of computer in the world. So after that, we actually saw the introduction of the loom, a machine that could produce fabrics and use what we call punch cards to create patterns on those fabrics and clothes. So it was actually produced by Jacques Joseph in 1800, and he used the punch cards to make the loom to be able to produce patterns and designs over and over. So after that, we actually saw, okay, that's a picture of the loom and the punch cards, and after that we saw Hermann Hollerith, who built the tabulating machine that used the readable punch cards to calculate. So it was a very major development in computers and its history, because prior to Hermann, US census normally took around 6 to 10 years, but Hermann used it, and it was able to conduct the US census in 1890 in less than 5 years. So that was a very big development. And after that, in 1812, Charles Babbage built the difference engine, which could calculate logarithm tables. I hope your mind is getting back to your calculators and all that. So after that, we got to another set of this introduction into computers, and it was in 1908 where James Powers built a certain machine with tabulators that were also used in the 1910 census. So after that, we saw Sperry Corporation produce UNIVAC computers. Like the first computers that actually came out was UNIVAC, and it was produced by Sperry Corporation. Some text will tell you ENIAC, etc. So, but after the UNIVAC came first, following the dates and the hierarchy and sequence of these inventions. So after UNIVAC, we saw Mark I was built by Howard Aiken and a team of IBM engineers, having the major programmer of the Mark I as Grace Moore, who was an admiral. That was in 1937, and Mark 1 was actually built as a digital computer. So after that, we saw another level of advancement in the history of computers, where in 1939 the University of Pennsylvania, United States of America, together with John Mulcahy, J. Presper Eckert, who were actually students of the university, together with a team of engineers, that built the ENIAC. And ENIAC was named the first electronic digital computer. It was finished in 1946, and it used vacuum tubes for its powers. So after that, we saw Ed Fabric came into existence in 1949, actually built in 1946, but it was brought to the world in 1949, so to say. It could add, subtract, multiply, and divide automatically, and it had a magnetic tape recorder, reader recorder, for recording inputs into the computers. And after that, in 1949, we saw EDSAC by the Cambridge University, London. It was the first computer that actually had a program run on it, and it used vacuum tubes for logic and mercury delay lines for its memory. So these are major things that happen, in the history of computers, and this actually led, inventors and scientists to actually say, okay, that there was something that was actually important about this evolution of computers, and they started doing some researches, and started trying to find out a lot of things, and the inventions that came like this actually helped to bring what you and I have today as many computers, notebooks, and laptops, and all that, and your desktop computers, even the age of the holograms and digital clocks and Bluetooths and headsets. So these are the things that led to that introduction. And actually after that, I decided to actually put down some specific features of the 5th generation of computers that we've had. So all those things you've actually seen, you actually divided into generations differently, as they moved and progressed and got better. So the first generation of computers actually has 8 unique features, and it was the vacuum tubes for power, and it stored things in its memory with magnetic drums. And the second generation of computers use magnetic tapes, not magnetic drums, for storage, and transistors for power, and not the vacuum tube. So after that, we saw the 3rd generation of computers, which brought about integrated circuits. If you look very well, in the background, you will see something that looks more like a circuit. If you're not a scientist, I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter. You can still know stuff like that. So the 3rd generation of computers used integrated circuits, and it was also during this time that we started using the word nanosecond to measure and process time. And it was this 3rd generation of computers that birthed the first mini computer that was produced by Digital Equipment Corporation. Now, the 4th generation of computers actually introduced a large-scale integrated circuits for making memory of the computers to become bigger and higher, and to contain a lot of information, unlike the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd generations. And it was then that we started saying microcomputers, and things got better. So that was in the 20th century, early 20th century and late 20th century. So actually right now we're in the generation of the fifth generation of computers, and this is I would call it the scary part, the generation of artificial intelligence. And it's I don't know how to talk about this, but it's a process of something I call deep learning, or something that's called deep learning. I wasn't the one that gave that word deep learning, but actually deep learning means teaching computers, machines, and robots how to live like us, think like us, process like us. And that means that it will get to a point where humans will be relieved of their jobs, education will become obsolete. Yes, because most of these things will be done by machines, and this is a generation where we're not just looking at training these machines, we're looking at making them become autonomous. They'll have their own power, so we won't have to even control them. That means this is a generation where we're getting to a point where, you know, machines will build machines and teach those machines how to live like humans. So it will mean that it will get scary, because a point will come, you know, in this fifth generation where humans won't have any need to go to work, and many people will lose a job. Even as a doctor, you won't be able to work because robots will be trained to work and trained to think like you. So that's actually the generation of computers that we are in. And you know, with these few stuff, you know, you can really get started. If someone asks you about the history of computers, you should know a handful of stuff to talk about. So this is actually where we'll have to end for today, and thank you for sticking around with me. And next session we'll be having the part 2 of this particular section, and I'll bring up a lot of important things.